Well, let me talk about another focus very briefly,
Sure.
which is in the thesis of justice here
Yes.
about murders that took place in '75. I've stated in a number of places, Guatemala and in Dhaka Tribune, that this is not only a Bangladesh question about accountability and justice, but for me, it's also an American question. Because if the United States, as I have reluctantly just found out and discovered and increasingly been able to document, not that this was the course I wanted to spend a great deal of time on, but it just one detail after another was brought to my attention, or people who came to talk to me, that unfortunately, I think the majors, Salil has given us a portrait of the trigger men, the men who were in front. The men who were behind, and they would not have moved without Zia Rahman's backing. Would Zia Rahman have moved without American backing? And was that obtained? In my view, that needs to be further investigated. And that is a question of people in both Bangladesh and the United States working together to find out those answers and to achieve that.
Could you share a little bit about the atmosphere after the coup, the chaos and the confusion? How did the majors manage to hold things together for as long as they did, and was the eventual denouement inevitable? Draw a picture for us, if you will, of those months from August to November and how things might have turned out differently and why they turned out the way they did. Was it inevitable that when the dust settles, Zia Rahman would be at the helm of the nation's affairs? Over to you, Larry.
Zafar, I think you took the two words out of my mouth that I was going to say. You asked how things were being held together. I think it's taken years to come to a full realization, but it was Zia Rahman who was holding things together, because I think it's hard to summarize in this program,
Sure.
but, and I think we touched on it a little bit more in our previous discussion on Straight Talk. But it's, and in the article that I published in Dhaka Tribune, we now know that a week before the coup, Zia Rahman was meeting with a senior member of the US Embassy, and that we also know, in fact, the CIA station chief in a private meeting in Dhaka. And we also know that there was tremendous tension within the American embassy over what had happened with the American ambassador, Eugene Bolster, very disturbed and distressed that this had taken place, because he had given instructions that all members of the embassy staff were to have no contact with anyone planning or involved, thinking about a coup. And he had articulated those 6 months before the events occurred. However, Zia and Cherry had met at a Bangladesh businessman's house in Dhaka at a dinner the week before that had been set up precisely so that they could meet. Zia's involvement in this and his eventual emergence as the leading figure and the path of blood that led to that. But the critical factor on that morning, as General Saifullah has said in his book and in an interview I had with him some years ago, was that Zia was the key fellow in the army, the deputy chief of army staff, who held back any other troops going to Road 32. And as we now know, the reason he did that was that Farouk and Rashid had been meeting months throughout the planning stages of this coup, and it was Zia's job to make sure the army didn't intervene against him.